On today's show, we'll be joined by Kris Gardner of the Houston Roundball Review to discuss the three most important players for the Houston Rockets, their rebuilding timeline, and the expectations for those players coming up this season. All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. We are free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. Joining us now is the owner of the Houston Roundball Review, none other than Kris Gardner, fellow credentialed Houston media member. Kris, we are just right around the corner from Houston Rockets Media Day. It's an exciting time of the NBA season where all the teams are healthy. There's a lot of optimism flying throughout the air, a lot of good emotions. Things feel good around this time of the year. And then, as we get, maybe a quarter or a fifth of the way through the season, that's when stuff starts to derail pretty quickly for a lot of teams around the NBA. But right now for the Houston Rockets, there are a lot of interesting storylines and narratives rolling into this season. Stephen Silas' third year coaching this young group of guys, a lot of exciting players in Kevin Porter Jr., Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, the new draftees, Jabari Smith Jr., Tari Eason, Ty Washington. So what I want to do today is narrow down with you who you think are the three most important Rockets heading forward in this rebuild. And this is a fun exercise because somebody's going to get left off this top three list, and people are going to feel some kind of way about that in the comments. But let's start with just your three names, and then we're going to navigate through those three names and kind of talk about expectations, goals, things that we are hoping to and anticipating from them this season.
You want all three at the top?
I'll tell you what, let's keep it a surprise for the rest of them. Well, let's start with your number one. And if you can put them in order, let's start with your number one guy. Because I think I have a clear-cut indication of who the number one guy is, but maybe I'm wrong. And maybe your perception is different than mine.
Number one, Jalen Green.
Okay. All right. We're on the same page there.
Yeah. And his second year, he was a number 2 draft pick. His rookie year had a rough start, great finish. So now let's see what he did during the offseason. He got stronger. The game should be slowing down for him more. So let's see if he's added to his game, increased that bag, and averages probably 20-plus points per game this season, and continue being the face of the Rockets franchise.
And to this point, has he cemented himself in your eyes as both necessary, and kind of this is a two-parter, right? As both the franchise guy moving forward for the Rockets, and on top of that, has he shown you enough at this point to think that there is future superstar potential there? Because that's what so much of the NBA is built around these days, is finding that tier one guy, right? Finding that guy who can be conceivably a top 10, top 20 player. Because let's face it, if you don't have one of those guys on your roster, you don't have a chance at the NBA level, the way the game is played today.
I think the organization has tabbed him as the face of the franchise. I don't believe he's there yet. And I'm going to show my age and my old school belief. For him to be elite, top 5, top 10, top 15, he needs to be great on both offense and defense. And I think his defense is much further behind his offense. But I think he's going to improve this season under Coach Hollins for sure. And that'll help him have an all-around game, which will help his stock rise.
I do appreciate where he was to end the year defensively compared to where he started, because he has worked on that side of the ball. I do completely agree with you. His defensive side of his game is much further behind than where he's at offensively right now, but he was always billed coming in as this, offensive weapon, tier one guy, alpha level bucket getter, scorer, whatever you want to call it. So that was always going to be the understanding. But for a guy like Jalen, right, for a young kid like him to discuss and talk about defense so much, right? In all his pre-draft interviews, a lot of the time last year during, interviews with the media, he brings up defense constantly, and the fact that he wants to be a two-way force, that he wants to be, a top-tier presence on that side of the basketball as well, and seeing, hearing somebody say that, and then watching them actually kind of put in the work on that side of the ball are two separate stories. But, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I do think he made proper strides last season to get better on that side of the basketball.
Oh, I agree. He made strides toward the end of the season. And ironically, I think you were part of those pre-draft media sessions. He said that he wanted to be Defensive Player of the Year as a rookie. And I think most of us are like, oh, that's great to hear. That's big talk. But that's hard to do. And I think his first few months, his defense, it just was not a priority. And I think he was lost, because wanting to be a good defensive player is different than knowing how to be a defensive player, angles. And he's just not strong enough to keep guys, to bang them off their spots. That's part of it as well. Second half of the season, things slowed down for him offensively and defensively. So that's a plus, improvement. And he does want to be a good defender. And that's part of it, because there's some guys in the NBA who just don't care about defense whatsoever. And we know some of them. But the second half of the season, the Rockets as a whole improved defensively, individually, and then team defense toward the end of the season. And that's all part of the process of getting better and growing and getting experience in the NBA.
And that's hopefully a trend that we continue to see going into this year, is growing and building on some of those individual principles. Again, you said it yourself, them getting better as individual defenders. And then once you get better and start growing as individual defenders, you can start to piece that together and form more of a cohesive team identity as a defensive, maybe not a defensive first team, but again, kind of building that defensive culture. And I do think Lionel Hollins is going to be the guy, like adding him, Steven Silas, adding him to his bench rotation, having him as an assistant coach is going to hopefully do wonders for this team. The addition of guys like Jabari Smith, Tari Eason kind of just elevates the defensive floor of this team. But Kris, when we look at the offensive side of the ball for Jalen Green, what skill, if any one skill that Jalen Green has right now, stands out to you the most from his offensive bag, be it maybe his shooting, his driving, finishing ability, anything? Is there one thing that stands out above the rest?
His quick first step. Finishing at the rim, if it's not a dunk, was an issue because he was just so frail. Let's say not frail, thin. A little body contact threw him off his rhythm. It was tough for him to finish at the rim through contact. I think that'll be different this season. He's gotten bigger, he's gotten stronger, so he should be able to finish through contact at the rim when it's not just a dunk.
What's the number one thing that you are looking for as far as improvement? I know we kind of already touched base on the defensive side of the ball for him, but what's the number one thing you're looking for improvement for Jalen offensively this season to kind of maybe see him take that sophomore year leap?
More assists, better passer, because part of him, when he becomes a better scorer, defense is going to try to keep him off make him do something different. Whether it's running him off three-point line, shutting down the lane, building a wall. So he has to see the defenses come to him and kick to his open teammates. And of course, we all know it. Part of an assist is pass to a teammate and a teammate making the shot. Jack's not going to pass to you all day, man. If you don't knock down the shot, no assist for me. And vice versa.
So in that regard, does Jalen Green get credit if like his potential assists go up? Like, is that a passable standard to measure this by? Because he could have like 12 potential assists a night and actually only rack up like 3 dimes if nobody's converting on these shots, Kris.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are some stat places that do almost like hockey assist kind of things. But if he makes the right reads, that's a start. That's progress. Not teammates got to knock down the shots, and then that'll be part of the overall improvement of the Rockets as well.
Talking about making the right reads, that was an area that Steven Silas, seemingly, especially in the second half of the season, really consistently praised Jalen, was his growth, his kind of game processing speed, reading and reacting to how defenses were guarding him, and getting to spots on the floor better, right? We saw, especially in that kind of second half of the season, final 1/3 of the season, we saw that defenses were starting to key in on Jalen as the focal point in the Rockets offense, with the offense kind of gradually starting to run more through him as he became more and more comfortable as the season went along. And we saw Jalen adapting to that, right? We saw him kind of bring back that midi that he abandoned, which he used a lot at the G League level and then seemingly just got rid of when he first came to the Rockets and wasn't really using it for the first half or so of the season. And then it really kind of was like his coming out party in that overtime win against the Lakers here in Houston, where he scored 19 straight points in the fourth quarter and overtime, and he utilized the mid-range a lot in that game, snaking pick and rolls, getting to the mid-range because teams were basically dropping their bigs back and playing him off the three-point line. And he was like, I think it was a post-game presser a game or two before that game, where he highlighted the fact he was like, I need to get back to the mid-range because of how teams are guarding me. I need to be more effective from that area of the floor. I'm paraphrasing here, but he had that recognition, and then the ability to recognize that and then implement it as a rookie is incredibly promising.
It is, and it's a good sign because as a rookie, I think we're seeing more and more younger guys utilizing the mid-range game, even though the analytics say that's a bad shot. But Jalen Green, you know, on the top side, other rookies, but we saw it last year. The younger players went to their mid-range game. Old head DeMar DeRozan thrives off it, has made a successful career out of the mid-range game. And younger guys are like, this shot works. If the lane is closed and three-point line is done, what else am I going to do? I got the mid-range shot. So let me take it and make it at a high percentage.
And I do think the misconception, right, for some people who are, either very pro analytics or who use analytics as necessarily, maybe a buzzword here, is that analytics aren't necessarily anti-mid-range. They're just anti-mid-range if you're a bad mid-range shooter. Like the analytics support a guy like Chris Paul feasting in the mid-range because he shoots them at an elite level. So if you can get to that place as a mid-range shooter where you're shooting above 50% from the mid-range, then absolutely, by all means, get there. Jalen Green is not quite there as far as the percentages go, but I'm confident that he can get to that place in his career because he can get to that spot so easily on the floor. Now, Chris, we held off on your other two names here. Go ahead and give me your second name that we're going to be talking about here in just a moment.
Kevin Porter Jr.
Ooh, I like it. I had a feeling that's where we were going to go. Coming up, we're going to talk about Kevin Porter Jr., his importance in the Rockets rebuild. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is your number one source for football betting info this season, and they've got you covered whether it's professional football, college football, you name it, they've got you covered over at BetOnline. Follow the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles for everything. And I mean everything, not just football. They've got you covered for the NBA season, which is right around the corner, MLB postseason. They've got all the fighting odds, UFC, MMA, boxing, you name it. They've got you covered over at BetOnline. Right now, you can take a look at who the odds-on favorites are for the NBA title this upcoming season. Right now, the Boston Celtics still the favorites at plus 600, even after the entire situation with Ime Udoka. Golden State Warriors coming in at number 2 at plus 650. Milwaukee Bucks in third place at plus 700. And then rounding out the top 5, you have the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Clippers at plus 750 apiece. So for all of that and more odds, head over to BetOnline to see the trends and action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. The topic at hand, Kevin Porter Jr., number 2 on KG's list of most important Rockets to the rebuilding process moving forward. And I respect Chris, I respect KPJ at number 2 on your list because arguably I wouldn't have been shocked if you came out and said KPJ number 1 on the list, frankly, because whether or not he pans out to the degree that the Rockets hope that he can pan out will be a huge driving force in how successful and how quickly this rebuild is successful. Because if KPJ, if we get like the worst possible outcome for KPJ and things bottom out completely, then that's worst case scenario. It's not looking great. And suddenly the Rockets, still are looking for a future point guard, all that stuff. If KPJ hits his ceiling, then we're talking about a future all-star backcourt duo between he and Jalen Green. So starting with KPJ, one of the most divisive topics amongst Rockets fans everywhere. I mean, in your eyes, do you even at this point have you are you exhausted by the whole is he or is he not a point guard debate? Do you have do you have a firm stance in that regard?
He's not a true point guard.
Okay.
I mean, I think we all agree on that. He's a lead guard. The Rockets' philosophy, Steven Silas, Rafael Stone, they really want to take guys really who are scorers, who are passers, and try to develop them into being more lead guards and try to make them NBA caliber point guards in today's NBA. The true point guard, I think Chris Paul, there's like a handful of true point guards left in the NBA today.
Yeah.
Okay. Scoot is not one of those. Scoot was not born to be a true point guard. We could argue whether, great point guards are born or made or whatever. That's not Scoot. Okay. He needs to just be a better leader on the floor, minimize his turnovers, and go back to his assists. Make the right pass, the right read, and then for assists, we all know it, teammates must knock down the shots. But he's got to make the right read, stop passing the ball into the crowd, and stop trying to do home run things and just keep it simple. And part of that is, he said it a lot, that he was, grew up, he always passed the ball in grassroots, going up at AAU. It's not the same thing. This is the NBA. Defenses are throwing at him he's never seen before. Okay, so you cannot do what you did in high school. Okay, so he's got to figure that out and learn the balance of when to score and when to pass and keep all of his teammates involved so everybody's happy, everybody eats.
I think that was one of the biggest areas of adjustment for him last season, because he very clearly has the ability to score the ball at a high level. He very clearly has a high level of floor vision, and he can facilitate. He can pass. He can do that. It's balancing those two roles. And in fact, there were games last year, Kris, where he'd walk out and it was like a mental thing where he would walk out and he would just decide, hey, I'm just going to rack up dimes. And he would get 3, 4, 5 assists by the end of the first quarter. And then there were other games where he came out and he seemingly was just almost too tunnel vision, just focused on scoring the ball, not, almost to an extent like icing out his teammates sometimes, because he was so determined to, play scoot ball and like get his and get into the isolations and all that. And it's balancing those two roles and knowing when to score, when to facilitate, when to slow things down, when to speed things up. And it's that general kind of feel for the game. So like you said, kind of just his on the court leadership, right? The point guard, whether you are a lead guard, whether you're a traditional, true point like a Chris Paul type, I don't care what you are, you need to have a good feel for the game, because I think we can even point to guys like a Kyrie Irving or a Steph Curry, guys who aren't necessarily traditional point guards, right? They very much rely on their scoring gravity, their shooting, their ability to put the ball in the bucket to generate offense for their respective teams. Those guys still have an incredible feel for the game, when to really attack, when to involve their teammates, all that stuff. So even though they're maybe not from the same line of true point guard like Chris Paul, their feel for the game is still leaps and bounds ahead of where KPJ is at right now. And I think that's what makes this year so important is, can we see that, right? That's the number one thing I'm looking for out of him. I don't need to see KPJ average 20 and 10 to feel good about his future. I just need to see him be consistent on a nightly basis, no more crazy highs and crazy lows, get to a consistent point, and then B, I need to see his feel for the game be better. And that's the hardest part, because you can't quantify that, right? You got to watch that. That's an eye test thing all the way through.
And I think you're making a great point. I think as a younger player, he's getting caught up in the opponent too much. It's like he's taking it personal to prove a point to whoever that opponent is for that particular game. Being consistent game in, game out, you should not care who the opponent is. You have a job to do for your team. Your job, part of your job, is to get your teammates involved in the offense. Not the ISO in the first quarter, not trying to prove a point to your opponent. I don't care what he said about you last season or what he said to you on Twitter, any of that kind of stuff. Your job is to get your teammates involved first, and then come third, fourth quarter, if you need it to go one-on-one, then you go eat. But part of being consistent, game in, game out, get 8 assists per game. Average that. 8, 7, 9, not 12, 4, 14, 2, 7, 8, 9 assists per game, and 2 or 3 turnovers, and that's it. Not 5, 6, 7. Scoot, what are you doing tonight, man? Play your game. Play within the offense. I don't care what the man said about your mom, your girlfriend, whatever he's doing, trying to get you off your game. Help us win. And then everything else will take care of itself.
Piggybacking off that point, Kris, you're talking about, Scoot staying, maybe, staying in his lane, fulfilling his role, right? If you were to look at this Rockets team and what we kind of project to be some of the top contributors, the main guys, one of the things that was so exciting about the end of last year, right, when they started benching guys, they benched the vets, no Eric Gordon, no Christian Wood, we got that glimpse at what this team could be in the future with Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. as the number 1 and 2 options. Is there a world, do you think this team is at potentially its best, or, the best version that it can be, right? Which is maybe like capped at like 30 wins, but that's besides the point. Mm-hmm. Do you think Scoot is at his best if he is a first or second option on the team? Or would you rather him see him be like the third or fourth option and prioritize getting other guys the ball, right? Getting Jalen the rock, getting Jabari in his spots, getting Alperen in his spots, that kind of thing.
That's a great question. I don't want him to be the first option, because I don't believe the Rockets are at their best if he's the first option. I think second or third option will be optimal. Right now, he's got to be the second option, I think, because we're not sure who that second option on the Rockets is going to be. Because I don't think it's going to be Eric Gordon. I don't think Eric's going to be here enough to get minutes consistently, a lot of minutes to do that. So then we got to talk about who else is going to be. And that could be leading into my third important Rocket for the next segment. But second option right now for Scoot, because he is a very good scorer. He needs to be just consistent with his passing, his playmaking, his ability to get his teammates involved and make the right decisions, and just keep it simple. That still works. You don't have to. Sometimes LP is the same issue. He tries for home run passes because LP's vision is better than probably any other teammate on the Rockets. But because he sees things other teammates don't see, the ball may end up in the crowd somewhere where they're just making a simple pass. So it's all part of the learning process for the Rockets.
It's funny because I don't know. Did you ever watch Queen's Gambit, Kris, or no?
No.
Okay, well, it was a fantastic show. It's on Netflix. You can go check it out. It was great. But it's like, there's like the scenes in Queen's Gambit where she's like running like, 20 chess moves ahead. And that's what I picture like LP doing when he's like breaking down exactly like where he's going to bounce the ball or how he's going to throw it over the top of the defense, or some of the insane passes where he flips it behind his head. And, they're just not even expecting it sometimes, which hopefully changes this season after, an off season working out with him and understanding, you need to have eyes 360 degrees around your head, because if Alpi has the ball, he will find you if you cut or if your man is caught sleeping or whatever. And hopefully there's some better anticipation elsewhere on the Rockets this season. But let's get to our third and final Rocket here that you got for us, Kris. So if I can, I will give you a brief drum roll and then you'll get to our third Rocket, which is
Jabari Smith Jr.
All right, Jabari Smith Jr., fresh out of the NBA draft, third overall pick. We'll talk about him coming up in just one moment. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. We are free and available on all podcast platforms, wherever you get your pods. We're also on YouTube, so go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe. While you're there on YouTube, be sure to search Houston Roundball Review. Go like, comment, and subscribe. Kris Gardner has been providing fantastic coverage of Houston basketball, not just Houston Rockets basketball, but also collegiate level ball, all of that over at the Houston Roundball Review for how many years have you been doing this now, Kris?
Since 1994.
Since before I was born, yep. Kris has been covering hoops. So that's impressive, and you should absolutely go subscribe to his YouTube channel. We need to pump those numbers up. Now, Kris, before we talk Jabari Smith Jr., are you more of an offensive guy or a defensive guy when it comes to basketball? Defense? All right. So I'm assuming you loved the Jabari Smith Jr. selection.
Oh, yes. And Jae'Sean, of course, too.
Okay, yeah. So two very defensive-minded guys. And again, it kind of feels like, it felt like almost like just a complete inverse 360, or I should say not 360, 180. We don't do geometry or math on this podcast. It's terrible. From last year's draft, right? Because it was Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, two guys who had this sky-high offensive potential. And then this year, in Jabari Smith Jr. and Jae'Sean, two guys who are out of this world defensive prospects, in addition to having their own, talent offensively. But Kris, I think the thing that really stood out to me about Jabari, in Summer League was I knew he was going to be a good defender at the NBA level. And I was excited about that possibility. And there was a reason that he was always number one on my board, even when it looked like the Rockets were going to get Paolo Banchero. Then he walks into Summer League and he looked dominant defensively. Was that the same perception that you got? Because to me, I feel like he can be a guy that changes the entire outlook of a team defensively, not just from a one-on-one perspective, but changes the entire complexion of your team's defense.
Agreed. And that's why I wasn't worried about his shot misses in the summer. He'll make that as his legs get stronger, more rest, all that kind of stuff. Offensively, he is a defensive guy. He has the potential to be a lockdown defender. Okay. And he's versatile defensively. Coach Silas, Coach Highland could say, Jabari, you're going to guard whoever in the front court. Basically, shut him down. Done. I got it, coach. Don't sweat it. And that opponent, his numbers, whatever they are coming to that game, he's going to get. Okay. That is the potential that Jabari Smith Jr. has defensively. Not many teams have a guy like that. And he loves defense. He loves making things difficult for the opponent. That defensive mindset is great. And I think he is going to be the leader defensively soon because he talks on defense. And we've talked about it before. The Rockets don't talk enough on defense to be a good defensive team. Jabari's going to change that. I think Tari will too. Man, the potential with him and Tari up front, man, I'm looking forward to this, man. I really am.
And I'm excited about it too, Kris, because first off, I'm a little bummed because I don't think we're going to see it right away because I think they're ultimately probably going to bring Tari Eason along a little bit more slowly. And they've got kind of a roster glut as is, where it might be really hard for Tari Eason to find minutes earlier in the season. But you're right, the idea of a front court featuring Jabari Smith Jr. and Tari Eason in any capacity, either as your 3-4 combo or potentially a 4 and small ball 5 combo, and that's to me the crazy thing is just the amount of flexibility you have with lineups, with decisions. I mean, you could roll out a lineup of Jae'Sean Tate, Tari Eason, and Jabari Smith at your 3-4-5, and suddenly the opposing team is shaking in their boots because they don't know how they're going to score the ball because you've got 3 lockdown defenders who are defense-first oriented type guys who can absolutely shut anybody down on a nightly basis. And I think that's the other part to me is I don't know, is there anybody that you've seen or anybody that Jabari kind of reminds you of as far as just his versatility from a defensive perspective?
That's a great question. I have not thought about that. In today's NBA, because of his height and length, I'm not sure. I could go way, way, way back, and he's a much more sane version of Dennis Rodman.
Okay.
Versatile because Dennis Rodman offensively was not nothing. Dennis Rodman, he could do it. He didn't care to do it. He enjoyed defense. He enjoyed. Dennis guarded 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5. He guarded everybody at some point. I think Jabari Smith can be that kind of defender. And we could say Draymond Green, but Draymond Green's 6'5". Jabari's 6'10". Okay, that's different. That is 5 inches, length, all those things. Now, I will say this. If Jabari can become as smart, as intelligent a defender as Draymond Green, man, sky's the limit. Wow.
He has all the physical gifts are there, and that's the crazy thing is you look at a guy, and again he's just 19 years old, right? He's 6'10", maybe 6'11" in shoes. Might not be done growing, right? Mm-hmm. He could hit 7 feet. And he's already come into the league at 220. He's got a great body on him, great, broad shoulders, good frame. He's going to be able to add over the course of his career, by the time he's done, adding weight, adding muscle, he'll be 235, 240 easily by the time he's done. At that point, you're talking about a guy that could easily play the 5 routinely and be a mismatch nightmare. Somebody that is going to space the floor all the way out because he's got not only 3-point range, he's got deep range, right? He was shooting well beyond the college 3-point line, and we know that he's going to be a good shooter, right? Summer League be damned. We know that shot is going to work itself out at the NBA level. He's too good of a shooter, and there's too big of a sample size at this point to be worried about it. So I look at this as his skill set is down the line. He's going to be a year in, year out all-star. I don't see any way that it doesn't coalesce for him that way.
And I think he'll be all defense. It's just a matter of time when he's all defensive team. Second year in the league, third year in the league, whatever. He's going to make all defensive teams a lot. And the potential is there. I don't want to see him play at the 5 a lot this year because physically I don't think he's ready for that, especially, more than probably 15 minutes a game. But I think his body will grow into that. And once he does, you said it, matchup nightmares all over the place, man. And the versatility, the flexibility that Steven Silas will have with this team, the future's bright, man. Real bright.
We've been, and again, there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic and excited about Jabari. Is there anything right now in his game that does give you pause for concern, that you are like, hey, number one on your list, Jabari, this has to be the thing that you prioritize and focus throughout your rookie year?
I didn't like it. It seemed to me his shot release this summer changed. It was just much flatter than it was at Auburn. And I don't know why that was the case. So as long as he gets the arc back on his shot, he'll be fine.
Yeah, that was kind of an odd development too. And I don't know if it was because he was thinking about it too much, if he was just kind of mentally, he came out a little bit. And I think that, I don't want to say deer in headlights because I feel like that's too negative of terminology phrasing to use, but it was after that first game, right, where the shots just really weren't falling, where you could tell that like he was kind of getting frustrated with himself and thinking about things, and it looked like it got to a point where it looked like he was lining up his shot, right? He wasn't just shooting it, he wasn't feeling it. He was thinking about his shot too much, and then almost to a degree psyched himself out. But the fact that even despite the offensive struggles, what we did see out of him offensively, I was encouraged by some of the other things that we saw out of him, because he was, one of the biggest detriments in his game was, he doesn't have a handle, he can't create, he can't drive for himself. And yet some of the things that we saw outside of him missing some, easily wide open shots during Summer League was the fact that he took guys off the dribble, he drove, he finished at the rim, finished through contact. And I think above all else, the thing that really stood out, Kris, was he made the right passes, right? He would swing the ball around the perimeter. He would take those little, he'd take the, he'd get the ball on the pass out, quick pump fake at 3, take 1 or 2 strong dribbles towards the rim, and then kick it out to the next open guy. And it's not, flashy creation. He's not, Sports Center top 10 highlight reel assists, but making those right reads, right? Like you said with KPJ, keeping it simple. That is important in an offense, to keep the ball moving like that.
Agreed. And that's, I think, a problem that a lot of younger players and really just bad teams, they try for the flashy stuff way too often. Just keep it simple. Pass to your open teammate, make the right read. Simple works. Okay. The great teams, year in, year out, they keep it simple. They make it look easy because they break it down to like the very simple things. The fundamentals still work. Give and goes, the pick and roll. Pick and roll is one of the oldest plays in the NBA because it works. You need the right personnel to make it work, but as long as you do that, pick and roll is going to be here for as long as the NBA exists. And
I'll tell you what, I'm just thankful that I don't ever have to watch Christian Wood set another screen in a Rockets jersey ever again. So there's that. Now, Kris, you have not earned any points with Alperen Sengun fans, so all of Turkey will be upset with you. So with that, you're going to have to come back at some point in the future to redeem yourself and talk up Alp a little bit once we're back in the season. But do me a favor, let all of our listeners know where they can track you down at.
And I look forward to coming back and praising Alp. No problem. Love his game too. But HoustonRoundballReview.com, as you stated, and I appreciate it, my man. Houston Roundball Review on YouTube, Houston Roundball Review on Instagram as well. Been around longer than you've been alive, since 1994, but I love it. Basketball season is here, and let's have some fun.
That's going to do it for today's episode. As always, appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on YouTube, so go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. While you're on YouTube, be sure to search up Houston Roundball Review, as well as liking, commenting, and subscribing on all of Kris Gardner's videos. Does a fantastic job covering the Houston Rockets and just basketball inside the city of Houston. So go give Kris a subscription. But with that, As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.